This story took place in the summer of 1988 when I was 6 years old. It was early August in eastern Idaho, which is family reunion territory, and that's where we were all headed. We were packed into the family van, headed up to my grandma's family's lodge in the mountains for the weekend where the reunion was taking place. This was always a favorite drive of mine, a very picturesque mountain pass covered in evergreens, and a beautiful creek following you most of the way along the winding road. Then you go up and over the summit and down into the beautiful valley where the lodge was located. I'm the type of person that can be content all on my own without anything from anyone. So naturally, my annoying older brother could never just let me be content on my own. His need to constantly agitate and egg me on was akin to his need for oxygen. So, it's only fitting that this beautiful drive would be soured by his annoying antics. Yes, I know all older brothers can be annoying, but I tell you, my older brother was on a whole other level. The drive from our house to the lodge is almost exactly 1 hour. The first 30 minutes is leaving our small city, driving through farmland, and then into that beautiful mountain drive I previously mentioned. Fortunately, on this drive, my parents were able to convince my oldest sister to sit next to annoying brother, so our journey was rather peaceful and kind of enjoyable, mostly because annoying brother isn't fully bored yet. But about halfway into the journey, he starts getting restless. And since we're all cooped up together, he's not just annoying me. Everyone else in the van is starting to get tired of his antics. We had one of those 80s Toyota vans that looked like a spaceship and didn't have an actual model name. It was just simply called Van. It sat 7. An annoying brother was sitting in the middle row next to the window that opened. He had it open and was floating his hand through the cool mountain air. Now, I don't know who said it first, but we all started messing with annoying brother by teasing him about a bird pooping on his hand, telling him, "You better pull your hand in before a bird poops on it." Annoying brother looked none too pleased at the unwelcome comments. "Well, if a bird does poop on me, I'll just smear it all over you," he snickered back at us. A few minutes goes by and you'd never believe what happened next. We hear annoying brother shriek. He pulls his hand in to reveal that a bird had emptied its tiny bowels all over his hand. What started as a joke became our hilarious reality. His hand was covered in that greenish-white gritty yolk that was unmistakably bird crap. It had hit his hand and splattered wonderfully, nearly covering his whole palm. I think he was slightly in shock at first, not being able to believe his own eyes. But he snapped to and started crying like a baby, panicking, freaking out. One more thing I should mention about annoying brother was that he was a bit of a germaphobe. You couldn't sit too close to him at breakfast, for fear that your mouth germs would somehow jump onto his breakfast, contaminating his food. So, at the sight of his hand covered in bird crap, it was almost too much for him to take in. But the shock didn't last long, as I said, and he started crying. Luckily, my mom came prepared with some hand wipes and cleaned his hand. Of course, to the boy afraid of pole vaulting breakfast germs, this wasn't good enough, and he wanted my dad to stop at the nearest gas station so he could wash his hand. My dad was feeling generous, I guess, through his laughter, and obliged by stopping at the last gas station before we'd reach the lodge. You'd better believe we told everyone at the lodge about what happened. My grandparents found it utterly hilarious. He didn't live it down that whole weekend. I loved watching him get some of the same crap. No pun intended, he used to constantly dish to me. As time went on, there were many more fights between us, usually where I would lose. But no matter what happened, I always had this event to draw upon to make me smile. This is actually my grandpa's story. He was 13 when it happened. He passed away back in 2008, but man, he sure loved telling funny stories. And this was one of his favorites. He grew up in a small town where there wasn't much to do during the summertime. The kids might go to the local swimming pool, perhaps a movie at their local theater, if they had any money, that is. Or they'd just go wander around town, loitering everywhere, and annoying everybody. So, you can imagine his surprise and excitement when he found out that one of his neighbors had a monkey. Yes, you heard that right. This neighbor had somehow procured one of those small rhesus monkeys and was keeping it as a pet. As you can imagine, in a small town like this, possessing a pet monkey was like possessing $1 million in cash, the level of intrigue is about the same for both. So, my grandpa grabs Walt, one of his cousins who's a couple of years older than him, and they head over to check this monkey out firsthand. They show up at this neighbor's house, and sure enough, there he is, out on his front porch with this little monkey just chilling on his arm. They hang out for a bit, visit the neighbor, and play with the monkey, which as predicted does monkey things, crawls all over them, latches onto their arms by wrapping itself all around it, etc. It's quite an experience for these two small-town boys, something they'll never forget. But this experience is about to be far more unique and unforgettable for a whole other reason than what has been mentioned thus far. Everything was going great and normal initially. Grandpa and Walt were conversing with the neighbor about how their summer's been going and what they've been enjoying the most, yada yada. It being summertime, it was hot as hot can be. So, to combat the heat, Walt was wearing loose overalls with nothing underneath. He was free-balling in his country boy hillbilly overalls, and in certain sitting positions they could be excessively loose and baggy on him, even opening up quite a bit. And what happened next shocked everyone while simultaneously causing uproarious laughter. As mentioned before, while leaning slightly forward to engage in conversation with everyone, Walt's overalls went into openness mode, and the monkey being directly across from him saw an opportunity that would present itself only briefly. The monkey instinctively saw what it perceived to be none other than a snack, or a toy. Because the little guy, in my grandpa's own words, reached right into those overalls and grabbed Walt's dink. You heard that right. The monkey grabbed Walt's privates, catching Walt completely off guard, obviously. It must have felt like an hour to Walt, but my grandpa said it was only a few seconds until the furry little guy let go. This move sent Walt into a tizzy, while Grandpa and this neighbor exploded with laughter. My grandpa was quite the prankster as a kid, so he obviously got a major kick out of this, even though it was a little raunchy. They didn't stay much longer after that. Grandpa and Walt left and had a quiet, awkward walk to Walt's house. Grandpa admitted having to bite his lip the whole way to not burst out laughing even more at Walt's expense. I can imagine Walt felt a little different after this experience, and wised up about what he would wear around animals from then on. Grandpa said as the years went on and Walt would get a little uppity, that they would simply bring this story up to humble him back down to earth. I once saw a squirrel attack a girl for her donut. It was early in the morning as I walked to class. It was a typical campus squirrel that had become far too accustomed to people. She was walking toward me, about 50 yards out, with coffee in one hand and the donut held upright in the other. The weather was cool and crisp. The donut appeared to be strawberry frosted. I was looking in her direction because, hey, who doesn't look at cute girls when there is a good opportunity? As she passed under a particularly low-hanging branch of a tree, the branch began to shake. She stopped, apparently curious and cautious of what was happening. As she looked up, Kamikaze Squirrel comes jumping onto her shoulder. She screams, puts both hands up trying to recoil from the tree rat, causing the donut to dislodge itself from between the wax paper sheet she was holding it with, as the donut strikes the ground. The squirrel swan dives from her shoulder and goes straight for it, then scurries off into some nearby brush. She stood there, completely shocked, with her coffee still in hand. No doubt it would have spilled everywhere if not for the lid. The sight of that squirrel running away with a donut the size of its body as she stood there helplessly was just absolutely hilarious. A complete tragedy and perfectly good waste of a delicious donut, but hilarious all the same.